The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Good morning, everybody. Kip Keefer on this holiday Monday. But remember, there are no such things as holidays on TKR.
Yeah, baby. Get your ass back to work. Get your ass back to work.
On the air here. Today is Labor Day, Tony. This is the day set aside for the working class. And here, Kip Keefer is still struggling for the man.
Get your ass back to work. Get it back to work.
Less talk, more. Well, in this case, it's more talk, less work. But anyway, with that being said, we are, of course, on the air. It's Monday. That means need to know. And I've got Labor Day as one of the themes today. I've got a couple of different things. We're not going to wax poetic on any one subject. I've got a couple of various thoughts and hopefully some things that you need to know, or maybe you don't need to know them, but didn't know them. But one of the things that I want to start off with is the very premise of this day, Labor Day, which is always the first Monday of every September. It was officially recognized in 1894. I don't want us to become a country, because I think it's happening more and more. Your country loses its identity and really its whole purpose for being, when all of a sudden the citizenry becomes immune to even wanting to know where the traditions and all of the things that mesh together to make us the commonality of Americans, which is the greatest privilege on the face of the earth, to be born and be a U.S. citizen and have all the rights and individual liberties and all the things that we take for granted and enjoy. But I don't want us to get to the point, and you might notice that I try to weave in a little bit of history in all the things I do, because I don't think that's emphasized anymore, especially when I talk to younger people who don't have any basic knowledge. And even some of my peers, people I work with, I think I told you recently that someone whose intellect I actually respect and is a good thinker and has a good mind. I was doing something on the 4th of July, I believe, right here on this program, and I was talking about where the whole tradition of put your John Hancock on this. Well, that became a thing because John Hancock was the president of the Continental Congress that seceded and declared their independence from Britain. And John Hancock, of course, as president of that conclave, was the first signature on the Declaration of Independence. So forevermore, put your John Hancock on this. That's where it comes from. Today, let's talk about Labor Day. Labor Day officially became a holiday, as mentioned, in 1894. And it emanated from a period, kind of a dark period in American history, to some degree, of massive, and tell me if this sounds familiar, because we always think we live in such unique times. There was massive migration to the United States. Almost in every case, the only way people could come to this country was legally. They had to enter the country through these processing channels. Predominantly Ellis Island in New York was by far the largest one. Stand in line for endless hours after coming across on these rat trap, far from luxury ships, far from any kind of leisurely travel that we think about seas and cruises now. These were a lot of ships for cattle and cargo and whatever, because of the mass exodus from Europe. There were people coming in the whole, especially after the Civil War in the late 1800s, in droves, and they would be processed. And that was illegal immigration. That was people coming to this country not to come and cash in on a bunch of free stuff and have the sanctuaries and all of the ridiculous hysteria from leftist motivated sources back then. These people legitimately wanted to come to this country that offered so much promise, and they totally bought in on the concept of being Americans. And they came here, and all of a sudden, our labor market, which was booming, that was right at the time in the late 1800s of the Industrial Revolution, where all kinds of innovation and invention, many that spawned from innovative thinking during the Civil War. In those war years, mostly to accommodate the military, not only in weaponry, but in provisions and uniforms and everything else, mass production and huge advances in manufacturing were reached. I don't remember what the number was, but there was like 175 or 200,000 patents taken out during the Civil War with new invention. It was just the darkest era of our country when we were at war with our brothers from the North and the South. Also spawned some of the most creative thinking in a time of absolute need. And when all that settled down, the Industrial Revolution was born, where all of a sudden manufacturing became this boom industry, and it was fostered by some of the leading economists and financiers of that time, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, and Andrew Carnegie in the steel industry. And they were these tremendous barons of progress and industry. But the problem was, for the workers, and with so much labor available that were all these immigrants coming from all over the world, you could get people to work for next to nothing. And there were no labor laws. There were no protections. You could work people for 12, 14 hours a day. There were no restrictions really on underage workers. There was no provisions for safety or for the welfare of any working person. People had to work to survive, and they had to play by the rules that were set forth. And you can look at these historic figures like Carnegie and Rockefeller and Morgan, and you can really kind of, as much as you have to praise their unbelievable innovation and drive and success, you also have to frown on the fact that they gave no regard to the people who were providing all of that production. And finally, workers got fed up, and labor unions started to form and organized labor demonstrations. The first parade for the American worker happened in New York City in 1882. And a lot of people at that time dismissed this as, these people just need to shut up and go to work. There wasn't much sympathy, but the movement started to make sense, and people started to understand that, these are human beings. These are not beasts of burden. And the sentiment started to change. And an American hero that was at the forefront of that was Theodore Roosevelt, who would later become president. Roosevelt was governor of New York and really got on board with the workers and was concerned about living conditions for workers and their lack of wages. Anyway, it gained momentum, and by 1894, Labor Day in New York and several other states was declared a day to celebrate workers and give them an extra day off with pay. Was instituted, and the big barons of industry went along with it because they saw the tide turning. Of course, they didn't like it. These guys that are in these positions like total control. We see it in our leaders now, political and business. So they thought they had a real devious idea. They had a guy named William McKinley who was their pro I'm trying to think, corporate candidate who they managed to use their vast fortunes to get elected. And when McKinley was the president in his second term, when he was reelected in 1900, once again, an election that was largely bought by the big barons of industry, they came up with the great idea. The biggest pain in the ass was Teddy Roosevelt, who was now just a tireless advocate for the workers. So they thought they came up with a really clever idea to have McKinley offer Theodore Roosevelt the opportunity to be vice president, because everybody knows, as it's even the case today, that probably the most neutered position in the federal government in terms of having no real power or authority is the vice president. Now, yes, they break ties in votes in the Senate, but that doesn't happen very often, except for in these times when you have such clearly partisan division. But back in that era, that wasn't the case. You had bills and you still had people serving in Congress who were there actually to represent their constituents, not there to further their political careers like we have now. Anyway, I digress. They made Theodore Roosevelt vice president, slapping themselves on the back. Okay, we've got him completely neutralized. They didn't count on William McKinley going to the Buffalo Exposition in 1901 and being shot in the receiving line by a guy named Leon Czolgosz, who was declared himself an anarchist and didn't like the way the government was running, and did not like that this president was bought another term. And Czolgosz assassinated William McKinley at the Buffalo Exposition. And guess what? The greatest nightmare that the big boys Morgan and Rockefeller and Carnegie could ever imagine. Teddy Roosevelt now is president of the United States. The horror. And that changed a lot of things, because it really put somebody at that bully pulpit, which is, of course, the nickname for the president having the loudest voice and the biggest platform. It really started to transform America, and it made what is the fabric of kind of our country today, stemming from the Industrial Revolution, protections for workers, restrictions on hours and overtime pay, and all the different things that Congress started to institute in the early 1900s when things changed. So that's the background of Labor Day. That's where it started, from just organic labor movements, and it was kind of a bone that was thrown to workers. Okay, we'll concede. You can have a day every year to celebrate the workers called Labor Day, and that's where it comes from. Now, the reason I also want to point that out is, if you're familiar with England, Great Britain, they've got a slew of holidays throughout the year, but and I found out about this in a roundabout way. My great radio partner and true love in the world, I mean, she's just amazing, Terry Quillian, was actually on an extended visit to England way back when we started talking 8 or 9 years ago. Actually, it's almost 11 now. I got to recalculate that. Anyway, she told me it was a holiday in England, and I said, what holiday? And she said, well, they really don't call them holidays. They call them bank holidays. Now, all of the holidays in that country started in honor of something, but now they've gotten so jaded, and nobody keeps up with history, and everybody's interests are so varied, and the country's kind of in a crisis period now. And that's what happens when everybody just becomes kind of independent thinkers and don't have traditions and things to fall back on. And that's what happens in England now. There's holidays all the time, but they're bank holidays. They're not designated for any purpose. Here, we've still got Labor Day. We've still got Memorial Day. We've got the 4th of July. We've got the Thanksgiving holiday. These are all federally mandated and all defined. And let's not get to that jaded point that happens in other parts of the world where they're just bank holidays. They're just a holiday to honor or commemorate nothing. At the core, there's still great days where you can, go and do what you want to do and watch ball games or go out on your boat or have a barbecue or family time, whatever you want to do. But let's not lose the identity of where all of these great American traditions come from. And that's what the people that are trying to turn this country upside down are always trying to accomplish, and they're always trying to take away the identity that's common to all Americans. And so far, God bless you all, my American brothers and sisters, you are resisting that, and it's resistance that's still important. Hold on to the things that make America special. Still honor your flag, still sing proudly the national anthem, know the history of your country, know the situations where America stepped up, did the impossible. I love one of the things that Donald Trump said during the campaign, and I know every time that I have a praise of Donald Trump, I'm labeled as a Trump lover. I'm not a Trump lover, but I am a Trump being in America first, because I'm Americans first. Anybody who's listening to this show that is one of my American brothers and sisters, I embrace you, I celebrate you, and I just think we're part of the best club in the world. But Trump said America excels at achieving the impossible. And I love that quote, and that's the greatest thing about being an American. Yes, were there dark days? I just mentioned some of those, abusive workers and different things. Of course, going all the way back to the hideous institution of slavery. There were a lot of mistakes made in this country in its formation, but there were a lot of things that, just to keep it all together, it was a necessary evil sometimes to go ahead and compromise on things that you knew weren't right, that could be fixed in the future. And it's no endorsement of the whole shameful treatment of the indigenous people and all the different horror stories. All that's true, and it's all crosses we need to bear as Americans. And there's no justification. There's no, well, that we were justified in doing that. But it was just a giant movement in this country to develop what the founders dreamed of, a land of freedom and individual liberty. And there were mistakes made, but there's so many triumphs, and the world is so much better off that America is strong and America is free and America is the shining city on the hill that it was intended to be. And that's my patriotic message on this Labor Day holiday. A couple quick things that I want to talk about. This week it came out more information about the insidious organization known as USAID. Some people call it USAID, but it's USAID. And it was an organization that was formed by John F. Kennedy during his administration in the early 60s. It had good intentions at first. It was to identify places in the world that needed American assistance and provide funding for various things that were in the American interest around the world. But it got completely hijacked over the years. It became bastardized into an organization that was basically money laundering, a slush fund, a government vehicle, still under the auspices of the federal government. And this is, remember now, it started in 1960. 62, I think, is when it was signed into law. So until the Doge fellas under Elon Musk, a completely independent assessment group, really started digging into what USAID was spending the hundreds of millions of dollars that Congress was allocating to them every year under the veiled cloak of deception that it was still to assist places in the world that would further American interests. It got completely changed into something else. It got changed into everybody's personal piggy bank to foster and promote their pet projects, whether it be all of this leftist agenda and all this nonsense that we've been force-fed for years, that finally the tide is turning. We don't want to be a socialist country. We don't want to be a country that is, driven by these leftist interests that are just so delusional. Socialism doesn't work. Everybody doesn't tie for first place. Everybody in this country has the opportunity for unlimited success. Is it fair? No. Life isn't fair. That's not the deal. Life without opportunity is not only not fair, it is intolerable. If you only have limits on what you can achieve, then there's no incentive to make your life better and to make the lives around the people that you know better, because our system is the only one that's even feasible for any kind of human being to have aspirations and motivations for a better life. So with all that being said, USAID became, as I said, the pet project and the slush fund, the money Congress allocating, and everybody that worked over these last 5, 6 decades, whatever, of USAID should be implicated and charged, or at least publicly shamed, because this is the most just awful organization that we have ever spawned in our federal government, because money targeted for all kinds of all this gender crap, and even before that, it was kind of a veiled way to undermine elections in other countries and try and control other parts of the world based on the agendas of the lawmakers that were pushing for various things. But their motivation was coming from having their pockets stuffed by private interests involved in all kinds of things. It comes back to the same thing I preach all the time here on Need to Know. Follow the money, and that will lead you to the answer to every seemingly baffling situation throughout the annals of mankind. So with all that being said, this organization coming out this week with we found out some more insidious things. The one that stood out to me was a couple of years ago, in the last years of the Biden administration, USAID gave Jim Acosta. Remember that name? He was with CNN during the first Trump administration. He was the guy always asking the ridiculous questions, always trying to gotcha President Trump. Finally got so far over the line that they didn't even let him represent CNN anymore in the sessions with the media, the briefings from the press secretary. Acosta became so hostile and so really idiocy was his hallmark. Finally, CNN got fed up and let him go because he was such an idiot and so unhinged, and just had made his whole reputation on trashing everything possible American, and even liberal CNN couldn't take it anymore. But our USAID saw clear to send Jim Acosta on assignments to promote supposedly the leftist agenda in other parts of the world, and file reports completely twisted and not factual. And this is not the definition of what he was doing, but his actual work under this auspice is undeniable. Basically, when the Ukraine situation started, again, prompted by influence peddlers on Capitol Hill who were getting money from all of these giant weapons manufacturers, the pharmaceutical folks during the COVID situation. Acosta's assignment with a $4 million grant from USAID was to go to places in the world and file these reports justifying Biden policy and also fostering the interests of these private industries so they could make a lot more money, to go and promote massive weapon sales or massive weapon handouts from our country to Ukraine to defend themselves, which sounds honorable on its surface, but it was for nefarious nefarious purposes for profit with no regard for human life whatsoever, escalating the war and giving more offensive weapons and more profits to these big concerns. That was Acosta's role, was to go and justify that to the American people and make people watching those reports say, oh, wow, yeah, we call my congressman. We need to allocate more money for this. Anyway, if Jim Acosta, who's one of the worst examples of media representation in recent memory, is given $4 million, guess who's giving him that $4 million to go and sell this false crap and try and bamboozle the American people into believing something that's not true? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is you and me. Pull out your last paycheck stub. Look how much withholding was taking place. I've watched a couple of teenagers recently get their first jobs, and they get their first check, and they're like, whoa, wait a minute. This is about half of what I'm supposed to get. It's a shocking reality that I think everybody listening can identify the first time you realize how much of your labor goes to the federal government. And when $4 million of billions that go to this agency from Congress every year, your representatives give these people money to spread all over the world for all of these pet projects and causes. When Jim Acosta, a failed reporter who's been fired from the most liberal network in the country, gets $4 million to go and represent our government, basically, with these false reports and documentaries and different alarming reports. You and me are paying for that. And I don't know about you, but that pisses me off. I don't want a dime of my money being given to these kind of pet project causes to foster the interests of others and not represent my country. So anyway, USAID pretty much has been completely gutted now. The Trump administration, that's if the Elon Musk Doge group did nothing else, shining the light on this nest of cockroaches is one of their greatest accomplishments. And let me say that this and go further. There is nobody in the government. While a lot of this is leftist crap, there are plenty of conservatives guilty in this as well. This is not a partisan conversation. Anybody who's been in Washington in any of this time since the formation of this insidious organization has been well aware. If you're a congressman, if you're a bureaucrat, a staffer, anybody who's been in government is equally guilty, because they had full knowledge what USAID was, and many of them used it for their own personal benefit and their own enrichment. And that is so heinous and so sickening, it's beyond description. So this is not Republican, Democrat, left, right, red, blue, whatever. This is everybody in Washington in the mechanism, the organism that is the U.S. government, that has been aware, and all of them were, of what this organization really was for. Shame on you, and you should be condemned to the highest degree of contempt by Americans and American citizens for callously wasting their money and shamelessly, a lot of that money winding up in your own pockets. So that's my soapbox for the day. Real quick, there was a report this week that Oprah Winfrey was fed up. She can't live in this country anymore under the leadership of Donald Trump. He's just so awful. He's so terrible. She's going to move abroad until his term is up. Well, after that came out and a lot of people reacted to it, they've stamped the fake news label on it now. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if Oprah ran her mouth and was able to have enough power to backtrack on that. Of course, we've already seen such world-class citizens as Eva Longoria and Rosie O'Donnell and Ellen all leave the country, actually leave. They're all living abroad now. And, I don't know about you, but I don't miss Rosie or Ava or Ellen one bit. And I would not have missed Oprah, if it's true. If Oprah bails, I'll be at the ship to wave goodbye, because, it is the ultimate hypocrisy when these people who have made millions of dollars, and yes, on their talent. I mean, the people I mentioned have been entertainers and actresses, whatever, commentators. And that's the beauty of the American system. But the system they've thrived in, the system that they have taken advantage of, exploited, benefited from, became in the right place at the right time. That's the dream of America. That's what free enterprise, market economy, freedom of expression, all of those things, those are the things America stands for. To stand up there and harangue this America First movement and espouse all of this leftist crap, when you've been some of the biggest beneficiaries of all time from our system, is just the ultimate hypocrisy. And Oprah would have been the biggest one of all time, because Oprah, America made Oprah. Oprah was amazingly ingenious in marketing herself properly and riding the wave of being an American. But then for those people to condemn this country that has treated them with such unbelievable good fortune and enriched them to the point, especially Oprah, of just unimaginable circumstances, when so many Americans are fighting every day just to keep their head above water. The ultimate hypocrisy is to espouse that this country is not fair and that it's totalitarian and this guy's a dictator. Donald Trump benefited from the same kind of good fortune and savvy manipulation of all of his talents, and now he's giving back by trying to make that American dream more accessible for more Americans, no matter what color they are, no matter what religion, what economic circumstance. He's trying to make America safe. He's trying to make America more profitable. And for that to be condemned by these people who have been the biggest beneficiaries from our country just rubs me completely the wrong way. And I also want to conclude on this, like everybody else, I was absolutely just devastated to hear the circumstances of last Wednesday in Minneapolis. Another sick, mentally ill piece of garbage walked up to a Catholic church and started firing weaponry, bullets, into a service of a morning mass for Catholic school students in their first week back in school, killing an 8 and 10-year-old. And because of the preparation that the school in these times, and to think that you have to prepare 6 and 7 and 10 and 12-year-olds in case they're ever attacked in this fashion, the kids responded. Most of them got to the floor. A lot of them were trying to protect each other. Teachers and adults and priests in the sanctuary were running around trying to get everybody to safety, completely ignoring the dangers themselves. 18 people were shot. Blessedly, only 2 died, but that's too many. And an 8 and a 10-year-old who have their lives ended in that manner is just so heartbreaking. I don't even have the words to describe that. And the perpetrator is another example of what is just gone horribly wrong in this country, because this is a young man who 4 or 5 years ago identified as a woman. He had it legally changed his name. His family supported it. Everybody coddled this guy along. His name was Robert. Now it was Robin. The media doesn't know to call him he or she. I hear people say, and she was just fed up, and she's been writing all of this stuff, and has been, espousing hatred for all religion and hatred for all kinds of American, principles, and on the barrel of her gun was "Kill Trump." And yet there were reports in the media that this was a homegrown right-wing terrorist who had hatred for everybody. Well, they leave out the fact that this is a trans person, which has been pushed by the other side as perfectly acceptable. And this is somebody who has been expressing frustration and hatred for their 4 or 5 years of their adult life, that was legally permitted to go buy a gun, because the background check really only looks into criminal activity. It needs to be expanded far beyond where it is. And I've got a solution here. I've got a remedy for this situation, because these people at their core that identify as other genders, when their genitalia and their DNA suggests otherwise, are mentally ill. I'm sorry. That's what they are. They're mentally ill if they reach the conclusion that the root of all their problems is because they were born a man, but they're actually a woman, and vice versa, or whatever, how many genders we're up to today. There's men and there's women. There's two sexes. That's it. And if there's other people that identify as something else, they're just fooling themselves, and AKA mental illness is the cause, because it becomes the focus of everything. The mass shooting at a school in Nashville a couple years ago, same thing. A guy who identified as a female went in and started killing children indiscriminately, because they know that's the softest target. It's the most cowardly thing you can do to make your statement and express your frustration. And they know that the killing of children inflicts the maximum just blow to society and people. If innocent children are the victims, there's nothing you can do to make a greater vile statement of your disillusionment, your mental illness, than to kill the most vulnerable people in our society and inflict the greatest wound on the populace that you can possibly be responsible for. And it keeps happening over and over again. There's a guy named Aaron Cohen, who's a former Mossad Israeli operative, who's American citizen. He had dual citizenship. He has worked with some technology companies to develop this unbelievably sophisticated artificial intelligence algorithm system that is going to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's going to scan social media posts, writings, blogs, things indiscriminately, not identifying, not targeting any individual per se, but just looking for the catchphrases, the words, the red flags in all of, because every time these people do this, they leave behind just unbelievable amounts of material, of things they've written expressing their delusion and their desire to inflict blows on our society. And with this kind of technology, you don't have to have manpower tracking this all the time. If this system, and again, this is developed from Israeli intelligence, which is the most sophisticated in the world, it should reveal some of the red flags where authorities then can follow up and go check on these people, because if they're family and friends, and I understand the hesitation, you don't want to go sell out somebody that you're related to or somebody that you're friends with or have known a long time, even though you can see the signs, you can see the alarm bells. But if it saves one child's life to have this person at least looked at and interviewed and intervention to take place, that's what's got to happen. And we've got to have the utilization of technology. These people, a lot of times, these are screams from the wilderness for help, that I'm out of control. I have these terrible thoughts of doing these awful things. And that is just the introduction we need to intercede here and maybe prevent some of these things from happening before they ever do, because I'm sick and tired of people saying, well, all the alarm bells were there, but nobody said or did anything. Almost every one of these mass shootings, these people's actions are basically predictable. unpredictable. And now maybe we have a tool to start rooting some of that out before the terrible atrocities happen and deaths of more of our children or any of our American brothers and sisters takes place. That's what you needed to know today on this Labor Day. I hope everybody has a fantastic day. Celebrate your freedom and independence on this day. Find something great to do and have a great rest of the week, everybody. College football is back. Pro football starts this weekend. All is glorious in the neighborhood, and we appreciate always you tuning in to TKR and checking out Need to Know.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.